The summer evening air was warm and filled with excitement as 16-year-old Damon stepped out of the rideshare car with his little sister Maya. The 14-year-old girl practically bounced on her feet as she stared up at the massive glass building in front of them. The Riverside Concert Hall looked like something out of a movie with its bright lights and fancy entrance. "I still can't believe Dad got us VIP tickets," Maya whispered, clutching the small envelope containing their passes. "This is literally the best birthday gift ever." Damon smiled at his sister's enthusiasm. Their father had surprised them both just 3 days ago, walking into the house with a mysterious grin and 2 golden envelopes. Inside were tickets to see their favorite artist perform live, but not just any tickets. These were VIP passes that cost more than most people spent on rent. "Remember what Dad said," Damon reminded her as they walked toward the entrance. "Don't lose those tickets, and stay close to me." The siblings had spent hours getting ready for this night. Maya wore her new black dress with sparkly shoes that she'd been saving for a special occasion. Damon had on his best button-down shirt and the dress shoes his grandmother had bought him for church. They wanted to look their best for what promised to be an unforgettable evening. As they approached the main entrance, they could see other concert-goers streaming in. Some looked like typical music fans in casual clothes, while others were clearly dressed for the VIP experience. Women in elegant dresses walked arm in arm with men in expensive suits. The difference between the regular ticket holders and VIP guests was obvious. "Tickets, please," said the woman at the front entrance. She was middle-aged with blonde hair pulled back tightly and a name tag that read, Jessica. When Maya handed over their passes, Jessica's eyes widened slightly. She examined the tickets more carefully than seemed necessary, turning them over and holding them up to the light. "These are VIP passes," Jessica said slowly, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "Yes, ma'am," Damon replied politely. "Is there a problem?" Jessica looked at the 2 teenagers again, her gaze moving from their faces to their clothes and back again. "No problem," she finally said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "The VIP entrance is around the side of the building. Follow the red carpet." She handed the tickets back with less care than she'd used to examine them. Damon noticed that she'd been much friendlier to the older white couple who'd entered just before them, chatting about the weather and wishing them a wonderful evening, but her interaction with him and Maya had been strictly business. "That was weird," Maya said quietly as they walked along the side of the building. "Some people just have bad days," Damon replied, though he'd noticed the difference in treatment, too. The VIP entrance was much smaller but definitely fancier. A red velvet rope guided guests toward a separate door where 2 security guards checked tickets. The line moved quickly, and soon the siblings found themselves inside a completely different world. The VIP area was incredible. Soft lighting created a warm atmosphere, and servers walked around carrying trays of fancy appetizers and drinks. The regular concert area visible below was already packed with people, but up here in the VIP section, everything felt more relaxed and exclusive. "This is amazing," Maya breathed, looking around at the comfortable seating areas and the perfect view of the stage. A server approached them carrying a tray of sparkling water and juice. "Welcome to VIP," she said with a professional smile. "Can I get you anything to drink?" "Thank you," Damon said, taking 2 glasses of juice. The server moved on quickly, but not before he caught her exchanging a glance with another staff member across the room. The siblings found their assigned seats, which were in the front row of the VIP section, with an unobstructed view of the stage. Maya pulled out her phone to take a selfie, grinning widely as she captured the moment. "Dad is going to flip when he sees this," she said, immediately posting the photo to her social media. Around them, other VIP guests settled into their seats. Most were adults, many appearing to be business people or wealthy families. Damon noticed that several people kept looking in their direction, some whispering to their companions after doing so. "Are people staring at us?" Maya asked, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Damon glanced around casually. "Maybe they're just wondering who we are. We're probably the youngest people in this section." But even as he said it, he could feel eyes on them. A group of older women at a nearby table seemed to be having an intense conversation, while periodically looking their way. Two men in expensive suits were also watching them, one leaning over to whisper something in the other's ear. "Maybe we should have dressed up more," Maya said, suddenly worried about her outfit choice. "You look perfect," Damon assured her. "We both do. We belong here just as much as anyone else." A staff member walked by, pretending to clean tables but clearly observing the siblings. When Damon made eye contact and nodded politely, the man quickly looked away and hurried off. It was becoming clear that their presence was causing some sort of stir among the venue employees. "Ladies and gentlemen," came an announcement over the sound system. "Welcome to Riverside Concert Hall. Tonight's performance will begin in approximately 30 minutes. Maya clapped excitedly, temporarily forgetting about the strange looks they'd been receiving. "I can't believe we're really here. Wait until Tasha and Keisha hear about this at school on Monday." Damon smiled at his sister's joy, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The looks from other guests were one thing, but the behavior of the staff was becoming increasingly obvious. Servers who had been chatty and friendly with other VIP guests became formal and distant when approaching their table. "Sir," said a security guard who had appeared beside their seats, "could I see your tickets again, please?" Damon frowned, but pulled out the passes. "Is everything okay?" The guard examined the tickets carefully, just like the woman at the entrance had done. "These are legitimate," he said, almost sounding surprised. "Sorry for the interruption." As the guard walked away, Maya grabbed her brother's arm. "Why do they keep checking our tickets? They didn't ask anyone else to show theirs again." Before Damon could answer, he noticed 3 staff members gathered near the VIP section entrance, engaged in what appeared to be a serious discussion. One of them, a woman who looked like she might be a manager, kept gesturing in their direction. The opening act began, filling the venue with music and temporarily distracting everyone from whatever drama had been building in the background. Maya sang along to the songs she knew, but Damon found it harder to relax. The feeling that they were being watched and discussed hadn't gone away. As the opening performance ended and the crowd prepared for the main event, Damon noticed the manager-type woman approaching their section with determined steps. His stomach began to tighten with a feeling he couldn't quite name, but one that suggested their perfect evening was about to take an unexpected turn. The applause for the opening act had barely died down when the woman Damon had noticed earlier finally made her move. She walked straight toward their seats with the confidence of someone who owned the place. Behind her followed a security guard, a tall man with broad shoulders who looked like he meant business. Maya was still buzzing with excitement from the opening performance, completely unaware of what was heading their way. She was busy texting her friends about how amazing the night had been so far. Damon, however, felt his stomach drop as he watched the pair approach. "Excuse me," the woman said, stopping directly in front of their seats. Her name tag read, Janet, Stephen's venue manager. She had the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, the fake kind that adults used when they were about to deliver bad news. "Good evening," Damon replied politely, though his heart was already racing. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake with your seating arrangement," Janet continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to getting her way. "We're going to need you to relocate to the general admission area." Maya looked up from her phone, confusion spreading across her face. "What do you mean? These are our seats. We have tickets." Janet's smile became even more strained. "I understand this might be disappointing, but sometimes there are mix-ups with ticket distribution. It happens more often than you'd think." Damon pulled out their tickets again, his hand steady despite the anxiety building in his chest. "Ma'am, these are legitimate VIP passes. We already showed them at the entrance and to your security guard about 20 minutes ago. Anyone can get their hands on tickets these days," Janet said dismissively, barely glancing at the passes. "With all the printing technology available, it's becoming a real problem for venues like ours." The security guard, whose name tag identified him as Mike Rodriguez, shifted uncomfortably behind Janet. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than standing there watching this conversation unfold. "Are you saying our tickets are fake?" Maya asked, her voice rising slightly. Several nearby VIP guests had stopped their conversations to watch what was happening. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," Janet replied. though her tone suggested exactly the opposite. I'm simply saying that mistakes happen, and we need to correct this situation before the main performance begins. Damon felt heat rising in his face, but he forced himself to stay calm. Could you please explain what specific mistake was made? Our tickets clearly show our seat numbers, and they were scanned at the entrance without any problems. Janet's patience appeared to be wearing thin. Young man, I don't think you understand how this works. This is a VIP section for our premium guests. The tickets you're holding don't belong to you. How do you know they don't belong to us? Maya demanded, her teenage sense of justice kicking in. Let's just say that kids your age don't typically have access to this level of seating, Janet responded coolly. These tickets cost more than most families spend on groceries in a month. The comment hit like a slap. Damon saw his sister's face crumple slightly, and he felt anger surge through him. But his father had taught him to always stay respectful, even when others weren't showing him the same courtesy. Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't know anything about our family or what we can afford, Damon said, his voice still polite but with an edge of steel. These tickets were purchased legitimately, and we have every right to be here. By now, their conversation had attracted the attention of nearly everyone in the VIP section. Some people were openly staring, while others pretended to look at their phones while obviously listening. A few had started recording with their devices, sensing that something significant was happening. Listen, Janet said, her fake politeness finally starting to crack. I'm trying to handle this quietly and with dignity, but if you continue to be difficult, I'll have security escort you out of the building entirely. Maya looked around at all the people watching them, her eyes beginning to fill with tears. This is so embarrassing, she whispered to her brother. Mike, the security guard, finally spoke up. Ma'am, their tickets do appear to be legitimate. The security features check out. Janet shot him a sharp look. Mike, I think I know how to do my job. These children clearly don't belong in this section. Children? Damon repeated, his composure finally starting to crack. We're teenagers with valid tickets to a concert. What exactly is the problem here? The problem, Janet said, abandoning all pretense of pleasantness, is that you two are disrupting the experience for our real VIP guests. People have been complaining about your presence since you arrived. This was news to Damon. They'd been sitting quietly, not bothering anyone, just enjoying the opening act like everyone else. Who complained? And what exactly did they complain about? Janet waved her hand dismissively. That's not your concern. What matters is that we need to resolve this situation immediately. An older woman at a nearby table leaned over to her companion. This is terrible, she said, loud enough for others to hear. Those kids haven't done anything wrong. Another VIP guest, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, pulled out his phone and started recording more obviously. This is unbelievable, he muttered. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Damon, can we just go? This is ruining everything. But Damon wasn't ready to give up. This wasn't just about the concert anymore. It was about the principle of the thing. They had done nothing wrong, and they weren't going to be bullied into leaving. I want to speak to your supervisor, Damon said firmly. Janet laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. I am the supervisor. I'm the venue manager, which means what I say goes. Then I want to call my father, Damon replied, pulling out his phone. Oh, this should be rich, Janet said sarcastically. Let me guess, Daddy's going to come down here and cause a scene? Mike looked increasingly uncomfortable with Janet's tone and behavior. Ma'am, maybe you should do your job and help me escort these kids to where they belong, Janet snapped at him. The tension in the VIP section was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Other guests were openly expressing their disapproval of how the situation was being handled. Someone had clearly started a live stream, because people were now talking about how many viewers were watching. You know what? Janet said, her voice getting louder. I'm done being nice about this. You have 30 seconds to gather your things and move to general admission, or security will remove you from the premises. Maya grabbed her brother's arm. Please, let's just go. I don't want to get in trouble. But Damon had reached his limit. His father had always taught him to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. especially when it was difficult. "I'm calling my father right now," he said, dialing the number with steady fingers. "And I think you're going to want to hear what he has to say." Janet rolled her eyes dramatically. "This is ridiculous. Mike, get ready to escort them out after this little phone call doesn't solve anything." As the phone began to ring, Damon noticed that several people in the VIP section were now recording everything that was happening. Whatever came next, it was going to be witnessed by a lot more people than just those in the concert hall. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hey son, how's the concert going?" Damon took a deep breath, acutely aware that everyone around him was listening. "Dad, we have a problem. The venue manager is trying to kick us out of our VIP seats." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When his father spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the casual, relaxed tone of a parent checking in on his kids. What replaced it was something much more serious. "Put me on, speaker Damon." Damon glanced at Janet, who was standing there with her arms crossed, clearly annoyed by what she saw as a waste of time. "Dad wants to talk to you on speaker." "Fine," Janet said with an exaggerated sigh. "Let's get this over with so we can resolve this situation." Damon switched his phone to speaker mode. "Okay, Dad, you're on speaker now." "Good evening," came the calm, professional voice from the phone. "To whom am I speaking?" Janet stepped closer, putting on her fake professional voice again. "This is Janet Stevens, venue manager at Riverside Concert Hall. And you are?" "My name is David Chen. Those are my children you're harassing." Janet blinked but didn't seem to recognize the name. "Mr. Chen, I'm sure you understand that we have protocols to follow. Your children are sitting in seats that weren't assigned to them. Is that so?" David's voice remained perfectly calm. "Could you please tell me exactly what protocol allows you to question the legitimacy of tickets that were purchased directly from the venue's box office?" "Well, Janet started but seemed to lose her train of thought for a moment. "There have been complaints from other guests about your children's behavior." Maya gasped softly at this obvious lie. They had been sitting quietly the entire time, doing nothing but enjoying the show. "What specific complaints?" David asked, his tone becoming sharper. "Please be very specific about what my children have done wrong." Janet looked around nervously, clearly not expecting to be pressed for details. "They've been disruptive, making noise, bothering other guests." "That's not true," Maya burst out. "We've been sitting here quietly the whole time." Several VIP guests nearby nodded in agreement. One woman called out, "She's right. These kids haven't done anything wrong." David's voice came through the speaker clearly. "Ms. Stevens, are you telling me that my children have been disruptive? Because I find that very hard to believe given how I raised them." "Mr. Chen," Janet said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "I'm sure you're a good parent, but sometimes kids act differently when they're away from home." "Mike," David said suddenly, addressing the security guard directly. "You've been watching my children this evening. Have they been disruptive in any way?" Mike looked extremely uncomfortable. He glanced at Janet, then at the phone, then back at Janet. "No, sir, they've been very well behaved." Janet shot Mike a furious look. "Mike, I don't think—" "Thank you, Mike," David interrupted. "I appreciate your honesty. Now, Mrs. Stevens, since we've established that my children haven't actually done anything wrong, perhaps you could explain the real reason you want them to move." The VIP section had gone completely silent, except for the conversation happening on the phone. Even the background music seemed quieter. Everyone was hanging on every word. "Look, Mr. Chen," Janet said, her voice becoming more defensive. "This is a high-end establishment. Our VIP guests expect a certain atmosphere." "And what atmosphere is that exactly?" David asked. Janet looked around at all the people watching, her clearly realizing she was walking into dangerous territory. "Well, our typical VIP clientele is, they're business professionals, established members of the community." "Are you saying my children don't belong with business professionals and established community members?" David's voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now that made everyone listening pay closer attention. "That's not what I said," Janet replied quickly. "Then what exactly are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, It sounds like you're making assumptions about my children based on their age and appearance. The older woman who had spoken up earlier whispered to her husband, I think this manager is about to be in serious trouble. Janet was starting to sweat now. Mr. Chen, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. This is simply a matter of venue policies. What specific policy states that teenagers cannot use VIP tickets? David asked. Well, there isn't exactly a written policy, but so you're making up rules as you go along? Janet opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Ms. Stevens, David continued, could you please tell me what company owns Riverside Concert Hall? What does that have to do with anything? Janet stammered. Just humor me. Who owns the venue where you work? Janet looked confused by the question. Chen Entertainment Group owns this venue, but I don't see why. She stopped mid-sentence. The color drained from her face as the pieces finally clicked together. Her eyes went wide as she stared at the phone in Damon's hand. Did you just say, Chen Entertainment Group? David asked pleasantly. Janet's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. You're not. I'm David Chen, CEO and majority owner of Chen Entertainment Group, the company that owns this venue, the company that employs you. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya grabbed her brother's arm, her eyes wide with shock. She had known their father was successful in business, but she hadn't realized he owned the concert hall they were sitting in. Mike, the security guard, took a step back and muttered something under his breath that sounded like, "Oh no." Several VIP guests had their phones out, clearly recording this incredible turn of events. The man who had been live streaming earlier was grinning broadly as his viewer count climbed. Janet's face had gone from pale to bright red. She looked like she might faint. Mr. Chen, I had no idea. I didn't know these were your children. And why should that matter? David asked, his voice now carrying unmistakable authority. Should the way you treat people depend on who their parents are? No, sir, of course not. Ms. Stevens, let me ask you something. If my children had been two white teenagers, would you have questioned their tickets? Janet looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. Sir, I would never. This isn't about. Answer the question, Ms. Stevens. The entire VIP section was watching this confrontation unfold. Several people were shaking their heads in disgust at Janet's behavior. Others were whispering about how they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. I think I may have made an error in judgment, Janet finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. An error in judgment, David repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling discrimination now? Maya squeezed her brother's hand. She felt a mixture of vindication and embarrassment. Part of her was glad that the truth was coming out, but another part of her felt bad that it had taken their father's identity to make people treat them with respect. Mr. Chen, Janet said desperately, please let me apologize to your children. This was all a terrible misunderstanding. Oh, Ms. Stevens, David said, his voice now ice cold. I think you understand the situation perfectly, and now I understand something too. I understand exactly what kind of person I have running one of my venues. The silence that followed David's last words seemed to stretch on forever. Janet stood frozen in place, her face cycling through different shades of red and white as the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. The VIP section had become so quiet that people could hear the distant sound of roadies setting up equipment on the main stage below. Mr. Chen, Janet finally managed to croak out, her voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. Please, I can explain everything. This was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? David's voice came through the speaker with crystalline clarity. You questioned my children's right to be in seats I personally arranged for them. You accused them of having fake tickets. You threatened to have them thrown out of a building I own. Which part of that was misunderstood? Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they weren't from embarrassment or hurt. They were from relief and a strange kind of pride. Her father wasn't just defending them. He was standing up for something bigger. Mike, the security guard, had been slowly backing away from Janet throughout the conversation. Now he looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. He kept glancing toward the exit as if calculating how quickly he could make his escape. "Sir," Mike interrupted nervously, "I want you to know that I told Ms. Stevens the kids' tickets were legitimate. I checked them myself." "Thank you, Mike," David replied. "But you also stood there while she continued to harass my children after you confirmed their tickets were real. Why didn't you speak up more forcefully?" Mike's shoulders sagged. I should have. You're right, sir. I should have done more." An older gentleman at a nearby table stood up and walked over. "Excuse me," he said, addressing the phone directly. "I'm Robert Martinez, and I want you to know that your children have been perfect guests tonight. They've done absolutely nothing wrong." "Thank you, Mr. Martinez," David said. "I appreciate you speaking up." "Actually," said the woman who had been live streaming earlier, "I've got the whole thing recorded on my phone. Your kids were just sitting there enjoying the show when this manager came over and started hassling them for no reason." More VIP guests began speaking up, each one confirming that Damon and Maya had been model guests. It was becoming clear to everyone present that Janet had created this entire situation out of nothing more than her own prejudices. Janet looked around desperately as person after person contradicted her version of events. "Please, everyone, let's not make this into something bigger than it needs to be." "Ms. Stevens," David said, his tone becoming even more serious, "I think it's already exactly as big as it needs to be. In fact, I think it's about to get bigger." Janet's hands were visibly shaking now. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm going to be conducting a full investigation into tonight's events. I'll be reviewing security footage, interviewing witnesses, and examining your employment record for any similar incidents." "Mr. Chen, please," Janet begged. "I've worked here for 8 years. I've never had any complaints before." "No complaints that were reported," David corrected. "But I'm wondering how many other families have been treated this way and simply decided not to fight back." Damon looked at his sister, who was staring at the phone with wide eyes. Neither of them had ever heard their father sound like this before. At home, he was just Dad, the guy who helped with homework and made terrible jokes at dinner. But this voice belonged to someone else entirely. This was the voice of a man who owned buildings and employed hundreds of people. "Furthermore," David continued, "I'm going to be having conversations with all of my venue managers about what happened here tonight. This kind of behavior doesn't just reflect poorly on you, Ms. Stevens. It reflects poorly on my entire company." Woman at a corner table whispered to her husband, "I can't believe we're witnessing this. This is like watching someone's career end in real time." Janet made one last desperate attempt to save herself. "Mr. Chen, I swear to you, this had nothing to do with race or age or anything like that. I was just trying to maintain the quality of the VIP experience." "By harassing 2 teenagers who were sitting quietly in their assigned seats?" David asked. I was told." "You were told what, exactly? By whom?" Janet's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to speak but couldn't find any words. It was becoming obvious that no one had told her anything. She had made assumptions based on nothing more than what she saw when she looked at Damon and Maya. "Ms. Stevens," David said, "let me explain something to you. Those 2 teenagers you tried to humiliate are not just my children. They're honor roll students. Damon volunteers at a local animal shelter every weekend. Maya tutors younger kids in math after school. They are exactly the kind of young people any venue should be proud to host." Maya felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She grabbed her brother's hand and squeezed it tight. "But more importantly," David continued, "it shouldn't matter if they were honor students or troublemakers. It shouldn't matter if they volunteer or not. What should matter is that they had valid tickets and were behaving appropriately. That should be enough." Mike shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Chen, what happens now?" "What happens now, Mike, is that I'm going to finish watching my children enjoy the concert they came here to see. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to be having some very serious conversations with my human resources department." Janet looked like she might collapse. "Sir, please, I have a family. I have 2 kids of my own. And I hope," David said coldly, "that no one ever treats your children the way you treated mine tonight." The main lights began to dim, signaling that the headlining act was about to take the stage. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more awkward. "Ms. Stevens," David said, "I want you to leave my children alone for the rest of the evening. They're going to enjoy this concert in peace, Mike. I want you to make sure that happens." "Yes, sir," Mike replied quickly. "And Ms. Stevens, don't go anywhere when the show ends. I'll be here to collect my children, and we're going to have a face-to-face conversation." Janet nodded mutely, looking like she was about to be sick. "Kids," David's voice softened completely as he addressed his children, "I'm sorry your special night got ruined by this nonsense. I love you both, and I'm proud of how you handled yourselves." "Thanks, Dad," Damon said, his voice thick with emotion. "We love you too," Maya added. "Now go enjoy the show. I'll see you both soon." The call ended, leaving the VIP section in stunned silence. Janet stood there for a moment longer, looking around at all the faces staring at her. Then, without saying another word, she turned and walked away. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Mike cleared his throat. Can I get you guys anything? Drinks, snacks, anything at all?" Damon almost smiled at how different the security guard's tone had become. "We're good, thanks." As the first notes of the headlining act began to play, Maya leaned over to her brother. "I can't believe Dad owns this place." "I can't believe Janet didn't know who he was," Damon replied. Around them, other VIP guests were settling back into their seats, but many were still buzzing about what they had just witnessed. Phones were still out, and it was clear that the story of what happened tonight wasn't going to stay contained within these walls. The concert ended with thunderous applause, but for Damon and Maya, the music had been just background noise to the whirlwind of emotions they were still processing. As the lights came up and other VIP guests began filing out, both teenagers sat in their seats, not quite ready to face whatever came next. "That was incredible," Maya said, though she wasn't talking about the performance. "I mean, the music was great, but everything that happened, I still can't believe it." Before Damon could respond, he spotted a familiar figure making his way through the crowd. Their father appeared at the VIP section entrance, and even from a distance they could see the controlled anger still simmering in his expression. David Chen looked exactly like what he was, a successful businessman who had been deeply insulted. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit, and his presence seemed to command attention from everyone around him. Several VIP guests who were leaving stopped to watch as he approached his children. "Dad!" Maya jumped up and ran to hug him. David's stern expression melted away completely as he wrapped his arms around his daughter. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice gentle again. "We're fine," Damon said, joining them. "Just a little shaken up." David studied both of his children carefully, as if checking for injuries that weren't physical. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. No one should ever be treated that way." "It's not your fault, Dad," Maya said. "Besides, you totally handled it." "Where's Janet?" David asked, looking around the nearly empty VIP section. "She left right after you hung up," Damon explained. "She looked pretty scared." "Good," David said, grimly. "She should be scared." As if summoned by their conversation, Janet appeared at the entrance to the VIP section. She had clearly been waiting for David to arrive, and she looked like she hadn't stopped shaking since their phone conversation. Behind her stood Mike, the security guard, looking equally nervous. "Mr. Chen," Janet called out hesitantly. "Could I speak with you?" David turned to face her, his business expression sliding back into place. "Kids, wait for me by the main entrance. This won't take long." Damon and Maya gathered their things and headed toward the exit, but they didn't go far. Along with several other curious onlookers, they lingered close enough to hear the conversation that was about to unfold. "Ms. Stevens," David said, his voice carrying across the space. "I hope you've spent the last 2 hours thinking about what happened here tonight." "Yes, sir, I have," Janet replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to apologize to you and your children. What I did was wrong." "What exactly did you do wrong?" David asked. "I want to hear you say it." Janet swallowed hard. "I made assumptions about your children based on their age and appearance. I treated them unfairly and tried to remove them from seats they had every right to occupy. And why did you do that? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Janet looked around at the people still watching, clearly wishing this conversation was happening in private. I don't know, she finally admitted. I saw two young black teenagers in the VIP section, and I just assumed they didn't belong there. Even after their tickets were verified as legitimate? Yes, Janet said, her voice cracking. Even after that? David nodded slowly. At least you're being honest now. But here's what I don't understand, Ms. Stevens. You've been working in hospitality for 8 years. You know that our job is to make every guest feel welcome and valued. So how does someone with your experience end up harassing children? I have no excuse, Janet said. I was wrong and I'm deeply sorry. Mike stepped forward nervously. Mr. Chen, I'd like to apologize too. I should have stopped this before it escalated. You're right, Mike, you should have, David agreed. When you confirmed that their tickets were real, that should have been the end of it. Instead, you stood by and watched my children be humiliated. Yes, sir, I failed in my duty. David looked between the two employees for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part of this is? It's not that you made my children feel unwelcome in a place I own. It's that you've probably done this to other families who didn't have the power to fight back. Janet's face crumpled. I swear I've never done anything like this before. Maybe not exactly like this, David said. But I'm willing to bet you've made other assumptions about other guests, and I'm willing to bet some of those families just accepted the treatment they received and never complained. Several people in the crowd nodded in agreement. The woman who had been live streaming earlier stepped forward. Excuse me, Mr. Chen. I posted the video of what happened tonight online. It's already been shared thousands of times. People are calling it an example of everyday discrimination that usually goes unnoticed. David turned to her. Thank you for recording it. Sometimes people need to see these things to believe they really happen. He turned back to Janet and Mike. Here's what's going to happen. Ms. Stevens, your employment with Chen Entertainment Group is terminated, effective immediately. Mike, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Janet had clearly expected this, but hearing it said out loud still hit her like a physical blow. I understand, she said quietly. Furthermore, David continued, I'm implementing mandatory bias training for all venue staff across our properties, and I'm establishing a guest relations hotline so that if anything like this ever happens again, people have a direct way to report it. Mike nodded grimly. That sounds like a good idea, sir. It shouldn't be necessary, David said sharply. Treating all guests with respect should be common sense. Janet looked like she wanted to say something else, but David held up a hand to stop her. Ms. Stevens, I suggest you use this experience to examine your own prejudices and figure out how to do better in the future. Because I guarantee you that what happened here tonight will follow you. The video is already online, and other employers will see it. I know, Janet said, tears finally starting to fall. I've already seen it. I've ruined my own life. You made a choice, David said without sympathy. Now you get to live with the consequences. As Janet and Mike walked away, David turned to address the small crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation. I want to thank everyone who spoke up for my children tonight, he said. In situations like this, silence is complicity. Your voices made a difference. Several people nodded and murmured their agreement before beginning to disperse. David walked over to where Damon and Maya were waiting. Ready to go home? More than ready, Maya said. This has been the craziest night of my life. As they walked toward the exit, Damon looked back at the now empty VIP section. Dad, do you think what happened tonight will actually change anything? David considered the question carefully. I think it's a start. Sometimes change happens one conversation at a time, one confrontation at a time. What happened here tonight got recorded and shared. Maybe it will make other people think twice before they treat someone unfairly. What about Janet? Maya asked. Do you think she learned anything? I hope so, David said. But honestly, that's not my responsibility. My responsibility was to protect you two and make sure this doesn't happen again at any of our venues. As they reached the parking lot, Maya looked up at her father. Dad, I'm proud of how you handled that. But I'm also proud that we tried to handle it ourselves first. David smiled and put his arms around both of his children. I'm proud of you too. You stood up for yourselves with dignity and respect, even when you weren't being treated the same way. The drive home was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts about the evening's events. By the time they pulled into their driveway, the video of their confrontation had been viewed over 50,000 times and was still climbing. The story didn't end that night. It became a talking point about discrimination, privilege, and the importance of speaking up when you see something wrong. But for Damon and Maya, the most important lesson was one their father had been teaching them their whole lives: that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their age, race, or background. And sometimes standing up for that principle means making some uncomfortable phone calls.